Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this session about opportunity in disruption. It's focusing on how strategic sustainability planning is changing and can be changed and creates new opportunities during post-COVID-19, and also in context of some other current and disruptive events that I think a lot of us are facing and thinking about. Right, so here's our speakers for today. Myself, Walker Wells. I'm with Ramey Associates, and then our three other speakers, Hallie, Emma, and Lewis, are with Cumming. All of us have worked on a range of sustainability plans, a number of which are also in higher ed. Ramey Associates is an interdisciplinary urban planning sustainability firm founded about 15 years ago, looking at cities and urban planning as an opportunity to affect positive change, and built on these sort of pillars of health, sustainability, and equity. And we have about 20 staff in 3 offices throughout California.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Sorrell. Hallie, Lewis, and I are all with Cumming Corporation. We work for the Energy and Sustainability Group. Cumming is an owner's advocate consulting firm. We have about 900 team members worldwide and have been in business about 23 years. Our sustainability work primarily focuses on education and public agency clients, so we bring that experience to the presentation today, as well as our experience working on the owner side in higher education. All of us actually come with a background in higher ed. We've worked across a wide range of different institutions, both as sustainability staff as well as on the academic side as faculty and in research institutes. So we bring a lot of that experience to the table, and we have a lot of lessons learned from our time working in higher ed, as well as consultants supporting these institutions. So for our session today, we want to talk about a couple of different things. First are the emergent issues that we're all dealing with right now. Of course, current events and disruptions are bringing a lot of challenges to our sustainability programs. COVID, of course, is a really big one. There are really critical conversations about racial equity and social justice that have been brought to the forefront at this moment in time. And of course, climate change is really continuing to become more and more disruptive. So today we want to propose a framework for how to address these issues in your sustainability planning work. And hopefully it can help you plan, evaluate, and ultimately retool your programs as needed to be more effective in the face of these disruptive events. So
just to talk a little bit more about these events that Emma touched on, we of course are all experiencing COVID-19 and the global pandemic and seeing lots and lots of disruption that's happened across higher ed. And of course, all these questions of when the students will be back on campus, back in classrooms, or continuing to get sorted out with different schools, sort of exploring and implementing different approaches. But I think more fundamentally, it's having an impact on questions about facilities, operation, what should and shouldn't be included in a sustainability plan, and of course, how to prepare for future health-related events. And this one, sort of a disruptive event that I caught a number of us by surprise and sort of perceived as a shock, but we're also seeing that it's having sort of long-term impacts as a stressor. Of course, there's the sort of focus on systemic racism, Black Lives Matter, and really thinking deeply about the way that different decision-making processes, budgeting processes, how things are designed, how they're operated, maybe based on assumptions that are inherently racist and really need to be explored in more detail. Again, both about how facilities are structured, curriculum is provided, and voices are heard. We're seeing shifting priorities in budget and certainly budgetary impacts caused by COVID, and as well as climate change and sort of renewed or increased awareness on issues of race. There's calls for changes in curriculum and bringing in different types of faculty members or lecturers. There's questions about the need for facilities, and of course these challenges of just operating existing facilities, keeping them maintained even though they aren't fully occupied. And then we have this shifting experience of working and learning online, which is opening up a lot of opportunities, I think, for schools to reach a broader network and base of students, but as mentioned before, calling into question some of these fundamental ideas about the residential colleges, the facilities that are needed, how much that needs to be part of the learning experience going forward. And then climate change, and we're seeing this, nationally. All of us are in California, and we've been experiencing another round of severe wildfires, which is creating immediate concerns about resilience and safety on campuses. At the campus where I teach at Pomona College in Claremont, California, the base of the Angeles National Forest, and a place where there have been fires and there have been issues of smoke and air quality. Which, if the students were there, would be raising issues for student health. At the same time, there's great facilities at those colleges that could potentially be facilities that could provide service to the broader community. But other schools are facing high heat, impacts of severe storms, hurricanes, and all indications on climate change are that we will continue to see increased intensity of these storm events. And then, as mentioned before, these sort of emerging issues, may seem like they kind of pop up as an emergency or a disaster, but, as they're repeated over time, they become sort of ongoing operational questions and then sources of stress, for faculty, for students, for administrators. And so, clearly these issues need to be factored into our conversations about sustainability, which is always inherently been looking towards the future, thinking about how we use resources today so that, there are resources to use in the future, and really sort of looking optimistically over the horizon and saying, where do we want to be, as we grow and evolve as an institution. So the bottom line is we cannot afford to wait until these crises are over to get back to sustainability. And, among us sustainability practitioners, there is the concern that sustainability is seen as sort of long-term, somewhat esoteric, sort of plodding undertaking, that can wait in the light of needing to adapt to COVID, or in the need to respond to issues about racial inequity, or to deal with the extreme weather event. But of course, all of these things are interrelated, and not only should sustainability not be sort of pushed to the wayside, our perspective is that sustainability can really create a platform, for the type of collaboration that's necessary to solve these vexing, systemic, multidisciplinary problems.
So today we want to offer a framework for how institutions can continue addressing their sustainability programs effectively during this time. How do you continue, either with a new planning process or with your implementation process of your existing plans? How do you overcome some of the challenges that these disruptive events are putting in our path? And we know that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but what we want to offer today is a framework that we think is really effective and adaptable to wherever you are in your process, and that can be used to really critically think about these issues and create a pathway to continue moving forward. So we've entered a period of change, and we believe that this ongoing change is really the new normal. There may come a point where we enter sort of a new stasis, but we think that change is just going to continue, and we need to be ready to adapt to that and live within those new circumstances. So in order to effectively respond and adapt in fluid situations, our organizations need to be more nimble, and we need to shift our thinking from sort of a traditional linear planning approach where you plan and you implement and then you report out, to a more cyclical type of process that really drives continuous improvement and allows for more adaptation in real time. So we're proposing the Plan, Do, Check, Act model as a really effective and valuable framework to continue your sustainability planning work, and to use this as not only to help you get started and as a framework to apply to your planning processes, from start to finish, but this really creates a model for adaptation and taking a hard look at whether your programs are really meeting the moment. We need to think about how to adapt our programs in these tough situations and, be less static in our programs. And that's not to say that our sustainability plans as they've been developed should be abandoned or that we want to flip-flop on commitments, but we really believe that moving forward, the definition of sustainability is evolving and we need to be prepared in real time to adapt our programs in line with those changing definitions and program needs. So we think that this is a beneficial framework, and we're going to talk through the different steps, what the potential challenges, opportunities, and key strategies are that you can apply when using this framework in the context of COVID and social justice and the other disruptive events that we're experiencing at this time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Louis, and as Emma alluded to a moment ago, we're going to walk through the different steps of this framework, and I'll be talking through the first step being the plan step. So in this first step, we are talking about strategic sustainability planning at this moment. And as we've highlighted in this presentation, the present disruptions are going to pose obstacles towards advancing or perhaps revisiting the sustainability planning process. However, there are strategies for moving forward and beginning to overcome these obstacles, and the moment is also providing us with opportunities to do this work in a better, in a more holistic, and a more lasting way. So when it comes to getting started or moving forward with the planning process, the present crises and disruptions may come to present a number of obstacles to move the planning effort forward. So for one, priorities for the moment are likely to have shifted away from sustainability. Now, most of us in higher education are familiar with that and understand that, especially when launching sustainability programs or planning efforts. Presenting sustainability as a priority for the institution is one of our biggest challenges. However, this may be more amplified as institutions now have to turn their attention on how to manage remote learning or work, how to keep their campuses and their personnel safe, how to deal with slashed budgets, how to manage their facilities at a time when they're not being used, as well as how to meaningfully address and play a role in reignited conversations about systemic racism or injustice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And sometimes these competing priorities, whether they be financial or operational or social, may distract from issues that lay at the foundation of the challenges a campus is facing. Campuses are concerned about how to stay afloat financially and support their students, their faculty, and their staff during the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, campuses need to start examining how to respond during long and sustained disruptions that happen to be multifaceted. After all, COVID-19 is not a purely economic or logistical crisis. It's a community and public health crisis. It's a physical and mental health crisis. And it's also an environmental and sustainability crisis. So that being said, you may find this to be an obstacle, that the campus may not be devoting enough attention to the foundational issues in sustainability and resilience that in fact bear significance on the financial and the operational challenges they are experiencing. And of course, remote learning and working in general makes it more challenging to engage in the planning process. We are used to moving these things forward in shared physical spaces. And while the means exist to gather and communicate and organize online, these come with their costs. Zoom fatigue is real, and there are real concerns with the long-term impacts of sitting in front of screens for prolonged periods of time. This makes taking on extracurricular or planning efforts challenging, not just for students, but for faculty and staff and other administrators as well. So how might we begin to overcome these obstacles? How do we draw the attention of our leadership, our primary stakeholders, our students, faculty, and staff to engage or re-engage in the planning process? How can we get people involved at a time when our mental and physical bandwidth feels a little limited? Well, for one, it requires us to think about how we are communicating sustainability and sustainability planning. It's a tremendous logistical undertaking, and there isn't a way around that, but it is a critical one, especially right now. We have to think about ways of communicating the alignment and intersections between sustainability and present and future campus priorities. There is alignment between environmental sustainability and the successful facilities management on campus. There's alignment between sustainability and addressing fiscal and financial challenges in both the short and the long term. And most importantly, there is alignment and critical intersection between sustainability issues and issues of social justice, equity, and community health. We know these things are not separate and should never be treated as such. The growing presence and conversation around the topic of intersectional environmentalism is a testament to that. So we have to communicate these things to our leadership and to our stakeholders and make sure that more than just a business case is made to move ahead with a sustainability plan. We also have to utilize sustainability as a means to unite different campus and organization groups, Too many campuses and institutions operate with their departments as silos, and this is a long-standing challenge in the sustainability world. We have to continue finding ways to communicate sustainability as a value add or a solutions opportunity for departments who are facing challenges right now. And we have to look beyond our facilities and operational departments too. We have to connect with our IT professionals who now more than ever bear the brunt of sustaining operations as people go remote. There's an opportunity to provide sustainability solutions to them that make their work easier and involve them in the planning process, especially as their services become more critical now and going forward. Lastly, we should engage campus entities who are experiencing mission disruptions due to a lack of normal or standard campus operations. Without a physical presence on campus, it becomes difficult for our health and wellness centers, our offices of institutional diversity, our environmental resource centers, and our student groups to do the work that they had been doing before. We need to bring those groups into the fold to not only and rightfully tap into their expertise, but also to provide them with a means of completing and pursuing their work through the planning process. And of course, the present moment, despite the challenges we face, provides us with opportunities at the planning stage of the process. This is our opportunity to re-examine and redefine institutional definitions of sustainability and resilience. And if they are not there, it is time to define them at an institutional level. Sustainability can no longer be just about standard environmental and operational performance improvements. Sustainability has to account for and meaningfully integrate concepts of equity, social justice, and intersectionality. And we see this already happening at a number of institutions. We see AASHE providing excellent resources and toolkits on these subjects. We also have an opportunity to redefine resilience, as we've long understood and tackled the concept from the perspective of chronic stressors and acute shocks that we are accustomed to seeing or experiencing. But COVID-19, for instance, is a long and sustained disruption unlike anything we've experienced. So we need to redefine resilience and approach it differently with this experience in mind in our planning efforts. This is also a great time to reimagine campus or institutional boundaries for your sustainability plan. We are now in a moment where much of the work we are doing resides off-site or off-campus, meaning that the location of our environmental footprint is shifting off of the physical campus boundary. However, it is also about institutions identifying where they take responsibility. Our campuses and institutions are part of larger communities. They play large roles in terms of community support, community commerce, and community identity and belonging. We have to think about the impacts of our institutional planning and decision-making outside of the physical boundaries of the campus. And that's not purely from an environmental sustainability, performance, or mitigation perspective, but also from a justice and equity perspective. So in relation to all of these issues, now is a good opportunity to consider expanding or resetting boundaries to effectively address these issues. And lastly, now might be the appropriate time to supplement or redefine the roles of existing campus entities. What have traditionally been the roles of our sustainability officers in centers or offices on campus? Do these roles need to change to address other critical components of sustainability on campus or to play bigger roles in the face of different crises? Do they need to be able to step up or step forward when things happen on campus that aren't exclusively environmental issues? So what about the role of your non-sustainability staff? Is sustainability a part of their job description or purpose? Is that a clear mission or value communicated in existing job descriptions for current employees or new job descriptions? Does it happen both at the full-time and part-time level? What about student employees? There is a chance to make that a priority or a strategy in your sustainability strategic planning process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hallie, who will talk us through the do phase of this planning framework. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hallie, and I'm going to be going over implementing your sustainability plan. So you've got your plan completed and you're ready to start implementing. And of course, you've got to cue the global pandemic and huge challenges for higher education. There's a number of obstacles that we're going to talk about that have already been alluded to today. I know we're all tired of hearing about these unprecedented times, but these are huge disruptions that have probably already had an effect and an impact on your ability to fund sustainability projects, your ability to hire, retain, and otherwise not lay off sustainability or partner staff. It's not just about your staff, but who you have to partner with across the university. Your ability to keep sustainability a priority amongst emerging and emergency issues, and your ability to connect with students and leverage student energy to keep your program or your plan going, or heck, just even yourself, right? We all need that student energy when we're trying to push this along. And then you've got to compete with distracted stakeholders that have competing priorities, or they have a work from home environment and they've got Zoom fatigue, as Lewis said, or they've turned into Zombies, right? And then there's the distraction of politics. We are in an incredibly divisive era and the election is coming up very shortly. And then we all just have 2020 burnout. I know I do. And I'm sure you're experiencing that, or most people are on your campus. So it's really about trying to identify what these obstacles are. I know they're slapping you in the face every day, but we've got a couple of ideas and solutions for you. So first of all, when you're looking at your strategies, you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to reprioritize. So in order to get traction and stick to your goals, you've got to balance meeting the needs of the moment with goal advancement. I know Emma touched on this. It's a tricky balance because you want to stay the course. Once you've set your goals, you want to make sure you do that, but you want to make sure that you're not being tone deaf to what's happening around you. So remember, you're a sustainability officer, and no matter how much staff you have, it's not enough, right? Your job is successful only to the extent that you can successfully partner with other departments and stakeholders. You need to manage those relationships and make sure that you aren't tone deaf to the ever-changing environment and the stressors that not only your department is feeling, but all of your partner departments. And sustainability is about balancing, right, those emergent issues of health and wellness of people, planet, and with fiscal responsibility. So when you're starting to implement these things, you're going to want to prioritize the actions and strategies in your plan and in your program that are based on what the current environment looks like. What are your, personnel resources that you have? What are the personnel resources of your partner departments? And then realign and make sure you prioritize the aligned actions and strategies that support mission critical activities. And then I'll just leave you with this on this slide here. Working on sustainability in higher education is a lot like pushing a barge through the ocean while you're swimming. Sometimes it takes a little time to get moving, and you're likely to have to course correct your direction right now. So be patient. What are the opportunities? It's hard to look at everything that's going on and see the silver lining, right? Opportunities that you have available that you're not going to have any other time, right? So all of a sudden there's facility access. There's access to buildings that are unoccupied. Now's a great time, perfect time to do those retrofits that are usually reserved only for the summer if you don't have summer camp staying with you. And also in a financially constrained environment, creating a green revolving fund can keep sustainability projects going and keep you on track for your goals, but it also lends legitimacy to your program in that you are reinvesting and focused on fiscal responsibility. And then I want to urge you to think opportunistically. It's a little bit out of character for what most of us want to think about, but you've got to take this opportunity for what it is. This disruption is a chance to use sustainability to support campus needs for human health and safety. So align yourself with EH&S and supporting that way and see how you can build partnerships there. Recommit and strengthen your social sustainability leg. I know it's a leg that's been weak for some time for most of the programs in higher ed, for most of us. So think about how you can reestablish that and recommit. And then reestablish interdepartmental relationships. This is kind of a reshuffling of the deck, and somebody took our box here and just shook it. And so you're likely to have a lot of opportunities to sort of re-engage campus partners in the spirit of support, right? So we come to campus partners and we ask them for things often. We're always asking for them to join us on projects and to join us in different ways. So try to think opportunistically about how you can leverage your sustainability program to support the efforts and the new constraints that these other departments are working on. And also, this is a great opportunity to refocus on climate change initiatives. We are seeing lots of extreme weather events, and it's on a lot of people's minds currently in the political landscape. And it's a good time to reinvigorate those conversations. And now I'm going to turn it over to Emma.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the check phase, the third step in the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. And this phase is really focused on performance monitoring and evaluation. And I think this is something that's challenging to do at any time, but it is also really important because it gives us that concrete data on how our programs are performing and the impact that we're actually able to have. Now, of course, during this time, there are some additional challenges to effectively evaluating program performance. Right now, we've got distorted data. That's a huge challenge. And I know collecting data is not a simple feat at any time, with multiple different systems and owners with, different areas, and just managing such a large volume of information can be a really big challenge. And especially right now where our data, with the disruptions to our physical plants and our facilities, the data may look really strange. And that's going to cause some challenges, whether you're at the very beginning of a sustainability plan process and trying to establish a baseline this year. It's going to be a strange year. Or if you're trying to evaluate your performance against an existing baseline, it's also not going to provide a very effective apples to apples comparison. So the distorted data is going to be a challenge, and that makes it harder to really evaluate the performance of the program if you don't have that data to fall back on. And data irregularities, like we're seeing in this slide, this is a graph of some water data where we had a really unexpected dip one year, and there's a lot of variables that contributed to that. But this can also cause leadership to call into question the value of sustainability programs when there are irregularities that have to be explained. And so I want to talk a little bit about some strategies to overcome those challenges and how to make the best of this evaluation period from a data perspective during this time. This step in the process and this framework is also a really critical time to evaluate your goals, your strategies, the vision and definition of your program. We're trying to create here a more dynamic approach to sustainability and creating these opportunities to gut check where we're going, what we're prioritizing, and demonstrating the value of that exercise to leadership. And so we think the Plan, Do, Check, Act model really embraces those opportunities and makes this a more dynamic process. It can also be a challenge to evaluate your program if your priorities are shifting. And so those moving targets can make it challenging. And right now there are so many competing priorities that may be competing for your time, or you have leadership deprioritizing certain initiatives and prioritizing other initiatives. How do you then effectively evaluate yourself and your program? So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that are available to help counter some of those challenges. So from a data perspective, one of the strategies available that may be helpful during this time period is normalizing your metrics. So if you typically use a total consumption value, total emissions types of values, those are really valuable when you have consistent operational conditions and you can compare year over year. But right now, that's really not an option because of these, major variables in our day-to-day operations, potentially low building occupancy, maybe campuses are shut down. That's going to create big challenges. And so normalizing your metrics may be a more effective way to evaluate your performance year over year in these circumstances that will give you a better sense of performance and be able to more effectively communicate the value of the program. So one example of that is indoor water use tends to be very, very strongly correlated with building occupancy. That's because people are using the restrooms, running water, and unlike energy, which may be more static regardless of whether the building is occupied or not. So by normalizing your water use to the occupancy of the building, you may be able to come up with a more meaningful metric that allows you to compare efficiency year over year. So that's one strategy when it comes to the data that might be helpful under these circumstances when it comes to evaluating performance. Another important strategy right now is taking a more qualitative approach to evaluating your program. Who are the key stakeholders within your program? Who do you want the stakeholders within your program to be, and are you engaging them right now? So taking a hard look at the program and bringing in more diverse perspective to analyze who's being involved, what are the goals of this program, what should the goals of this program be, and how do we realign in order to meet those goals. So broadening the stakeholder engagement and as Lewis and Hallie have both spoken about, kind of broadening the boundaries of your program. Just looking at your traditional campus footprint may not be sufficient to meet your sustainability goals under an evolving definition. If we need to more effectively address the needs of the community. Perhaps, students are taking courses remotely and they're not located within the campus boundary. So broadening your campus boundaries and bringing in a more diverse set of stakeholders to help evaluate from a qualitative perspective how effective the program is in meeting the needs of that evolving sustainability definition is going to be really valuable. And lastly, we find that there's a lot of value in evaluating your programs through specific lenses. And it's hard to take a look, there's so many variables and, a lot of different things to consider. Sustainability in theory can touch kind of the whole world. So breaking your evaluation process down into specific categories can help you more effectively determine what the opportunities might be related to specific issues or categories. So a couple of examples of that, you might want to evaluate your program from a social equity lens. And so by developing social equity criteria, you can run your plan or your program through an evaluation process specifically through that lens. And it can help raise opportunities or identify issues that you may not have identified before when you're trying to review the plan or the program from a broader perspective. When it comes to social equity, we like to take the approach that equity needs to be both in the process as well as in the outcomes. And so it needs to be considered from sort of a broader base. You can almost give it kind of a who, what, when, where, why type of framework when evaluating equity. Who are our key stakeholders? What are the issues that might be impacting them? Why are those things important and why do they matter to us as a campus and as an educational institution to our core mission? Where are they located and how might that impact our campus boundaries or the boundaries of our plan or program? And why is that important? Other lenses you might want to consider beyond social equity are resilience, health and wellness. If you can identify what are those key issues that you want to take a deeper look at and really evaluate your plan in that context, and then develop criteria for each of those lenses, it'll allow you to have a better evaluation process. All right, so some opportunities, and we've touched on this quite a bit, but this is a key opportunity in this check process to determine, does your sustainability plan, strategy, or program meet the needs of the moment? And that's really the big question and opportunity that's arising right now in the wake of this disruption, is really a chance to take a hard look at things and determine, do we need to realign? Do we need to retool? Do we need to evaluate and update the definition of sustainability for our campus and for our institution? Are we adequately addressing equity and social justice issues in our sustainability plan? And I know that can be a challenge, but now is really the moment to kind of take a hard look at that and make some hard decisions. Resilience is another one. Are we adequately considering resilience in our sustainability plan, and especially under the evolving definition of sustainability and resilience? Campus boundaries, we've spoken to that already, and we can kind of break boundaries into different spheres, directly owned and operated, owned and not operated, and then even beyond out into the university sphere of influence, which can be directly in the local community, but it can also extend to wherever your students are located, wherever their home bases are. And so thinking critically about those boundaries and what the needs of your community are and how to properly address those in your plan. And then lastly, campus roles and responsibilities. Lewis spoke to this a little bit, but this is an opportunity to reevaluate who is responsible for sustainability on the campus, and if there's an opportunity to really expand those responsibilities. And so you might think about some of the non-traditional, what non-traditional positions might start playing a role in sustainability or bring a lot of value to the program. Maybe it's the environmental health and safety departments, maybe it's an equity office, and sustainability really has an opportunity here in this moment to start pulling together these groups that may not have been really connected under the umbrella of sustainability before. And so this is part of kind of an opportunity for campuses to redefine what that means, what sustainability means to the campus and in the context of other departments and offices. And then lastly, this is an opportunity as well to think about the student experience. Students have been deeply affected by COVID and not being on campuses for classes or having a disrupted campus experience. And so how can sustainability be leveraged to improve the student experience, and simultaneously how can the student experience strengthen the sustainability program? And so we kind of think about this from a health and wellness perspective frequently, that healthy buildings encourage and promote better academic performance. But I think there's a lot of ways in which sustainability and student experience go hand in hand and can help advance each other. So that's another thing to consider during this time. And I'm going to hand it off to Walker to speak about the last element of the framework, ACT.
Thanks, Emma. So this final stage on ACT is really about looking at ways to revise and retool and scale different activities. And sort of, I think a lot of this four-step process is a method for continuous improvement, but also for continuous innovation, and to start things, see how they go, evaluate them, and then look at broader application, campus-wide or system-wide. And so it's all based on this idea that part of sustainability is being flexible and being able to adapt and respond to changing conditions, and understanding that ecosystems are constantly changing and evolving and resetting themselves, and we need to look at the campus ecosystem in a similar way. I think responding to these various emerging issues that we've been discussing really speaks to the need to be nimble and kind of have infrastructure in place, governance structure, administrative structure that is able to be responsive. And then finally, based on our kind of looking at some of these issues that we've talked about through this sort of four-part process, we've been able to come up with an initial framework of some key questions that probably or should definitely be asked in order to begin this dialogue about how the issues we've talked about need to get folded into sustainability. So here are the questions, and I'm a lecturer at Pomona College and at UCLA, and so this may be a classic sort of teacher move, is to say, well, I don't have the answers, but I can help you ask the right kind of questions. And I think that's where we are in this process. Now, there aren't definitive findings, sort of absolute lists of guidelines or principles about how to respond to a global pandemic, or increased scrutiny and awareness of historic and systemic racism, or we're all kind of doing the best we can at both trying to mitigate climate change, but also adapt to the climate change that we're seeing, and identifying ways to become more resilient, and figuring out how much of that is about hardening versus sort of creating social infrastructure to address some of these shocks and stresses. So here's the questions. How have these disruptions changed where you are in sustainability? Has it just put on the brakes, or has it actually had a relatively de minimis effect? Have you had to stop doing certain things in order to, say, look at reconfiguring facilities that took you away from an energy efficiency or a water efficiency upgrade that you need to be picking back up and taking to completion? Does sustainability give us an opportunity to bring a more diverse group of entities around a collaborative table? So for many of us, sustainability started with the resource issues, energy, water, waste, kind of got into transportation, how we deal with food, procurement, and then into curriculum. But there may need to be deeper questions about broader hiring practices, benefits for all of the people who make a campus work, and really this connection between the campus and the broader community, both into being an asset from a facility standpoint, but potentially being an asset in helping the broader community understand what the potential issues and risks that they may be exposed to, which gets us to this more inclusive definition of sustainability. Now, sustainability has always had economy, equity, and environment in there. For many of us, we've kind of operated in the environmental space and trying to justify the economics to show that there's a payback. And the sort of the equity piece has largely been about avoiding, disproportionate burdens. But, true equity also looks at the benefits and who's getting them and how they're distributed. And it looks backwards in time and says who's been harmed in the past and, what needs to be considered going forward. True equity, looks at, intergenerational issues and really looks at systems and how those systems need to be altered. So I think several of, our speakers today, said, if anything, it may just be changing our sort of geographic sustainability or definition of sustainability, and not just the campus, but to include the broader community that the campus operates within. A few more key questions here in this sort of Socratic approach. Is social justice adequately addressed in your plan or program? And as Emma mentioned, both in process and in outcome. So, the process is who's at the table to share their needs, who's at the table to decide how resources are distributed, and then are you able to actually set, performance metrics and indicators, for equity and social justice. These are harder things to put a number to, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And there are a number of proxies that, that have been used, dollars that go to certain communities, the sort of ethnic diversity of, the population of employees, job years that are created, for people who live within a certain region, green jobs that are created. So there are ways to put some numbers around something that may seem more qualitative, but we can give it a qualitative and quantitative frame so that it can be tracked. We are very interested in this question, which is, how do these emerging issues and new initiatives align with STARS? Is STARS able to absorb, all of this new stuff, or does STARS itself need to be re-examined and stretched and modified slightly to ensure that, issues again of sort of resilience, equity, and sort of public health are fully addressed. And then, is there a way to make sustainability part of these solutions so people aren't saying, well, this is really about a social distancing thing, we don't see a sustainability option, or this is really about enabling better access for remote learning, we don't see a sustainability option. But my experience is, at least, is there's always a sustainability option and a sustainability opportunity, and often by sort of shifting and looking at things from a sustainability lens or mindset, we're able to have a different kind of a conversation than that may have happened otherwise, and a way to bridge between silos and then, actually identify new opportunities for effectiveness and outcomes, within what may seem sort of an established or ossified system. So, sustainability can kind of put a new vantage point on things. And I think the question is, how does the sustainability practitioners make sure they're in the room when these sort of decisions are being made, often in response to shocks, where there can be quick decisions that aren't really considering all of the long-term consequences. So here's our contact information, and also just I want to say thank you to all of you for listening in. Again, I'm Walker with Ramey Associates, and then Emma, Luis, and Hallie are all with Cumming, and we're all sort of active in working on these, sustainability and higher ed issues. And if you have questions or suggestions, we would love to hear them.